Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Patient-Focused Clinical Trial Sample Collection, Management and Tracking. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X-Talks moderator for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, and that's found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require assistance, please contact me at any time by sending me a message using that chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and be made available to you for future streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank LabConnect, who developed the content for this presentation. LabConnect is a preeminent provider of central laboratory support services for analytically and logistically complex studies, such as immuno-oncology, cell and gene therapies, and rare and orphan diseases. They offer unique and innovative services that have been specifically designed to meet the exacting demands of today's clinical trials. LabConnect's worldwide scope of services includes routine and specialized testing, real-time sample tracking, data integration, biorepository, sample processing, and specialized functional outsourcing, leading the evolution in central laboratory services since 2002. LabConnect services are customized to fit the unique needs of your trial. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's event, and that's Stephanie Weber. Stephanie is one of the industry's leading experts in virtual global sample tracking and management, overseeing LabConnect's advanced therapy and SampleGISTIcs services. She joined LabConnect in 2009, bringing more than 10 years of combined central and specialty laboratory project management experience across domestic and global clinical trials. Stephanie has spent the last decade working with top pharma clients and other industry experts to help develop LabConnect's comprehensive sample tracking platform, SampleGISTIcs. She has a degree in chemistry from the College of Staten Island, as well as a law degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
Thank you, Sonia.
You're welcome.
Okay. So welcome everyone today to today's webinar. I want to thank you all for joining, and I'm really excited to present to you today on some exciting tracking and sample management services and offerings, and to just talk about some of the solutions we have out there for our complex trials. So the agenda today, we've already gone through the introduction. Thank you so much, Sonia, for that. So we'll talk a little bit about how complex trials have evolved over the last 10 years, and what that looks like and the challenges that it poses on sample management and collection, and also for our patients and sites and how to manage that complexity. So after we talk through the challenges, we'll walk through some of the strategies, such as virtual accessioning, some of the technologies that can be used to employ the virtual accessioning, and also logistics, which plays a huge role in sample management and movements globally around the world. We'll also look at some patient-focused services, such as home health care options, and integrating that into your sample management plan. So with this, we also have logistical challenges, right? So thinking about the sites and all the labs that they are now having to ship to, not just through their central lab, but now they have multiple sample types that are going to academic labs, or they're going to specialty labs. The stability of the samples, the location of these labs in relation to the site, determining the timing and route of sample shipment from the sites, really looking at the logistical challenges that this does pose to really come up with a good logistical plan up front, so that you have easy for the sites, so we have less error in performing those shipments and ensuring accuracy. I think many of you have heard from time to time, and it's not uncommon that a site will ship samples to the incorrect laboratory. So that could either result in redirection of shipment, which is shipping cost, or it could result in losing that sample due to its stability parameters. So some of the study challenges. So obviously with the advancements in science and technology and where we're going in research, there's a lot of unique specimen types and different variations of collections and different assays that may not even exist yet. Specialized collection materials have created new challenges in trying to secure those materials, and how do we move forward with a sample plan that, a new assay, new collection material, validation of all those components. So with these complex studies, this all has to be looked at in your sample management and tracking plan in conjunction with the logistics and everything we just talked about. So that poses a challenge in making sure that we have something that is going to be easy to manage, and at the end of the day, really provide a quality sample. These are high-value samples we don't want to lose, and it is a data point, so we do not want to lose that. What we're seeing too, and in these adaptive protocol designs in personalized medicine, is the decisions regarding patient safety and care and treatment of these patients is based on some of these samples. So determining how we're going to dose a subject, whether they're going to go into a different arm, et cetera. So that poses challenges in how to make those decisions if we don't have real-time information or real-time access of where those samples are to get the analysis when we need to. Also with these studies, it feels like these complex studies are also going through amendment. It feels like they're in amendment about 75 to 80% of the time, and I know there's people out there that know what I'm talking about. It's always an amendment, there's always changes, and the changes need to happen quickly. So it's something that we've noted over the last 10 years in these studies and be able to adapt to those changes rather quickly. So how fast can we implement a change? That question always comes up. Well, obviously it depends on the extent of the change, but ultimately the bottom line is we have to look at when do we need to implement this change and how quickly is humanly possible, right? So really looking at that, working with clients to be able to amend protocols quickly, because this is the nature of the game. It's not going to go away, so we have to figure out how to adapt to that. So that is something that's a challenge across the board, but it's something that we've been fairly good at over the last 10 years, and have learned we are not just going to set these parameters, but we are going to adapt to that challenge and get it done. So also, I mean, with all this that I've talked about, the different sample types, the assays, the logistics, you need to have that technical or specialized knowledge, or SMEs, based on the study, whether it be science, operations, programming. Maybe there's some programmatical things that you're going to need that doesn't exist. Working with clients and thinking outside the box on what it is that you're going to need to see, and can we make that happen? Looking at the logistics, having that SME logistical plan, right? So all of these tie together and really having that knowledge. And obviously quality. There's a whole quality component around sample management and logistics and testing, and obviously in clinical trials. So really looking at all the quality needs in every component that we're talking about. So I'm going to guess that you all, or most of you on this call, have stood here and said, where are my samples? Have they been collected? Have they been shipped? Have they been stored, received, analyzed? Where's my data? So this is the challenge, really, that clients have been asking over the last 10 years. How can I log into a system with all these multiple labs? I'd have to log into each separate one. Or I have dedicated SMEs or a team in my group that is working on trying to track these and in a spreadsheet. Having that knowledge of where your samples are at any given time around the world at a site without ever having to ship it, and know that it's been data cleaned in real time, and be able to log in and see that, how amazing would that be? So we'll talk a little bit some of those the strategies to make that happen. So obviously we talked a lot about having technical knowledge, specialized knowledge, and whether it be assay validation, whether it be logistics. So really having a dedicated team of SMEs has been very important over the last 10 years in executing some of the services to overcome these challenges. So it's really tailored to a study need. The study needs. Every study is unique and different, and every study that we have has a sample tracking plan or other logistical plan that we've talked about. So really pulling all those components together and pulling in the SMEs. Someone who is very, very versed in logistics may not be very versed in sample preparation, let's say. So really pulling in the right SMEs to pull together this plan to accommodate these, to strategize to accommodate the needs of these complex trials. Having the ability to track from the moment of collection, so on the day of collection, not necessarily after it's been shipped or when it's through courier, in the courier and on its way to a lab, and that you know there's a package, and I'll talk a little bit later of some of the different tracking options that are out there, but really knowing that I had a sample that was collected today and I know where it is and I have the information on that. Virtual accessioning capabilities and technology. So how do we do this? So having the ability to get real-time information and data and do the data cleaning up front of all the subject and sample information, utilizing virtual accessioning to get real-time collection of the sample and subject metadata. So everything in real time, you're able to clean it, you get better compliance. If you have those abilities, it just makes downstream data cleaning much simpler. The quality of the samples, you know where everything is. The ability to forecast. So a strategy, all of this works hand in hand. Being able, in order to know what you have missing, you need to be able to forecast what visits you do have. So I have a subject coming in, and they're going to be on X schedule, and I know when their visits are going to occur. Being able to forecast that out, anticipate the visit, query when it's missed, query for missing samples, having that ability is important. And I think forecasting is a challenge in clinical trials, and really, forecasting enrollment, forecasting resource needs to manage this trial, forecasting your bell curve on your clinical trial and how it's running, forecasting for vendor management, right? So having that ability to know what's coming and querying and reconciling in real time is very important. Naturally, this leads to some abilities in some of these cell and gene trials when we talk about product tracking. And so product tracking, what we're talking about is from the moment of collection, we have the source material from the patient, and we can track. We put together a sample tracking plan that's going to go through the CMO. Now we're adding on another leg of that tracking. Very simple. We already have the basics, but being able to virtually do this without ever receiving a sample. So we're, LabConnect is a central lab, but being able to track that sample from collection through the CMO and then back to the site to then deliver the medication to the patient. So having that ability is huge, and that's all done virtually. So having the capabilities of virtual tracking and sample management is something that we've been doing for 10 years, and it's been very successful. And I think in today's world, we're seeing that virtual work and virtual tracking is going to be more and more needed. So we look about logistics, some strategies. We'll talk about logistics and home health integration. A lot of these studies that I'm talking about, the cell and gene, rare disease, orphan studies, there's a lot of, we're seeing an uptick in home health care needs. So, and obviously in today, that what we're all experiencing worldwide, there is an uptick in home health care needs, right? So how do we integrate logistics and the sample collection and management? It's going to require some integration there with your central lab and the kits and the collections, and being able to virtually track that information and be able to go to a patient's home with that, right? So really integrating and working with a home health care agency so it's seamless and that they can go to the patient's homes. The patient doesn't have to come in. I mean, these complex studies are so, all the visits that they have to go to the doctor's office for, that's very time-consuming and cumbersome for a patient who is ill. So having that ability to, minimize that for them to be able to have their blood collections from home is ideal. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies in virtual accessioning. I talked a little bit about this earlier, about being able to log in to a system and seeing where your samples are anywhere in the world, and know when it's been collected, know when it's in transit, and know when it's been received, what the location is. How awesome would that be? Well, it can happen. We provide that service today, and we use different tools, which I'll talk about. But really, this is those SMEs. So this diagram here just shows if a sample is collected at 8 a.m. And the information is logged, it's really how are we getting that information? And this is really going to go into some of the technology that I'll talk about. How are we getting that information? Really, the technology that you use is only as good as your end user that's willing to use it. So really, compliance is key here. Sites are working, they're very busy, they don't want a new device, they don't want to have to log in anywhere. So looking at the different technologies that work, some work and some don't, but what's going to give us the greatest compliance in getting that information in real time? So imagine getting that information and then it's in the system, data cleaned, we're sending queries. Ultimately, we can send a query within 5 minutes of a form being submitted. So we'll talk a little bit about the technologies there, but it's ultimately the people. So the people are behind the scenes monitoring these, using the forecast, monitoring these sample collections, ensuring that what should be in the system is in the system within 24 hours for clients to be able to access and have that real-time visibility of where their samples are. And this all goes through the sample tracking plan. You can see the visibility of the location, status. If you're tracking drug product, however many steps, it's really, we could track a workflow. And what you'll see in the system is the status, location, and date of that sample. So it's really just the team, and then doing that real-time reconciliation, use forecast tool, providing 100% accountability of every visit and every sample. So I will talk a little bit about one of the tools that we do use, which is digital pen technology. A lot of people call it a magic pen, but once you learn about what it does, it's not really magical. It is a real pen, so nothing changes at the site level. They're utilizing a pen with ink. It has real ink. The paper source is the same. Nothing has changed. The only difference is that we're asking them to use this digital pen. And this digital pen captures data, so it's completely encrypted. There's a dot pattern, dot matrix pattern on this form that captures that the camera inside the pen, when it touches that form, it knows what form it's writing on. So it's like a barcode for the entire form. So the camera inside the pen captures the vector data, and then when we get that information, when that gets docked via USB at the site through a desktop application, that just sends us that vector data. They don't have to be different. They don't have to go into the form. There's an alternate method to scan the form. If for some reason they weren't able to use the pen, they could use a real pen. It's all paper, so nothing has changed. Real pen and paper. The ability here is compliance in actually getting the information. The site does not have to go log in anywhere. They don't have to scan the form if they don't want to. All they have to do is just use the pen and dock it. So this is what we see. What you're seeing here is the handwriting recognition software, which is the red and green information, and then the handwriting that was captured via the pen. So this is what we see when we review this form. This is the initial virtual accessioning process without ever receiving a sample. And this is just a basic sample tracking that we have on the form here. Really what I was talking about is having the ability to log into a system and see where your samples are at any given time and be able to manage and monitor that. And that really takes that team of SMEs. So having that information when a sample is collected, on the day of collection, being able to see that information within 24 hours, if not the same day, where a team of experts is querying and really reconciling. So reconciling also for those missed visits, utilizing a forecast tool, really having live access into a system that you know what has been collected anywhere in the world without that sample ever being moved or shipped. This is something that LabConnect does provide. So this is just a infographic of what this would look like. And every sample, every tracking, every study has a unique sample management and logistical plan in executing this. And it really takes a team of experts to make this happen, to then follow through on what that plan is, querying for sites for missed visits, querying for missed collections, really providing 100% accountability of every visit and every sample. So talking about the virtual accessioning, the tools that we utilize, one tool is a digital pen. So the digital pen is a real pen. It does write with ink. What you see here is an actual digital form. There's an application that the sites will download at the very beginning during initiation. That's really an application where it will allow us, the digital pen when docked via USB, to just send vector data. So it's XYZ coordinates. So the dot pattern is unique, so when the pen touches that paper, it knows what paper it's writing on, and then the camera inside captures that vector data. And so that's what you see here. What's important to take home in this tool is that the digital pen is not for every study. but really it's about compliance and getting the information. Your technology and tools are only as good as your end users, and the compliance that we've had so far with the pen has been very high because they don't have to do anything different. They don't have to go scan a form. They don't have to go fax a form. They don't have to go into a database and do this data entry. It is a pen. It writes with ink, so there's also no risk. If there was an issue with the pen, battery were dead, or there was an issue, we would send a new pen. But ultimately, it's still a pen with ink, so the source document is still there. All the documentation and everything still remains the same. So that is the beauty of it. So the compliance really is key here, and providing technologies for those sites to get the information. So if we look at this form, what you'll see is the handwriting, and then you'll see the digital data capture. And really, this is that virtual accessioning process. So what we're doing is we're verifying. If you see the field that is in green versus red, we click and verify every single field. If it's illegible, we send a query. If it's blank, we send a query. So this is ultimately that virtual accessioning process, and we are verifying every single field on this form. And also what should have been collected, when it should have been shipped. We're really following that sample tracking plan. So utilizing this tool in the forms and our systems and the alerts that we have and our forecasting capabilities to really execute and manage and execute on that sample management plan that we've set up for a particular study. So this is what you would see. So virtual accessioning, right? So that now we have the tools, one of the tools that we utilize to get the information, and really having that ability to look into the system, a dashboard. So this is where that virtual accessioning process happens. You can log in and see your samples and their status. This is just a dashboard. There's lots of different views. We partnered over the last 10 years with different top pharma companies to build this out based on their needs on these complex studies, right? So what it is that they want to see. So really looking at this and building the system out and continuously doing so. But here it is at your fingertips. You can log in and see where your samples at any given time. I talked a little bit about the product tracking. So if we look at how we've set up a sample tracking plan and the using the digital pens and looking at the form is very unique and customizable, we will then, allows us naturally to then extend that tracking and be flexible. So we can track the source material, which is the original sample from a subject or a patient, and track that to a CMO, and then also downstream track that through to the clinical site to then provide that medication to that subject or patient. Really, and just whatever that tracking plan is, it's very customizable. We can track workflows as long as we have the inputs and information and a plan up front. You can execute on this virtual accessioning. There is no limit. So the virtual accessioning piece, this is all without us receiving a sample. Okay. Obviously, I talked a little bit about forecasting. So utilizing, I think this is a key component to clinical trials, and I think it's a challenge. Also with these complex trials and different arms and subjects, being in one schedule and then being moved to another or being put on hold, having that ability to know how can we reconcile and query for missed visits if we don't know when they've occurred. So forecasting is key. Being able to assign a subject to a schedule and follow that schedule, and then also manipulate that schedule based on are they going to be moving to another schedule? Are they going to be on hold? We're seeing a lot of different variations in arms and cycles and, and different rules that are being applied to some of these trials. So 10 years ago, I think it was a little bit easier to have a forecast, right? For most studies, it was a little more straightforward. It still is complex. But now it's gotten to the point where it's very, very complex, so very manual. And so in order to reconcile and query for missed visits, we want to be able to know what's been missed and be able to follow that. So this really goes to this team of experts that we talked about that have that ability. We can apply this into our system, assign those subjects to an event schedule, and then query for those missed visits and missed samples. And I want to talk a little bit about scheduling, and I think I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the different levels of tracking, but scheduling really goes to another level of tracking where we're monitoring when a visit should happen with a subject by the hour. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that really kind of goes hand in hand with this forecasting model, just one step ahead in forecasting and knowing when that subject should come in by the hour. So here's some of the sample tracking options, and I think there's a lot of, we get questions about tracking, and you hear that there's a lot of tracking happening in the clinical trial space, and everyone's looking, how do we track samples? And everyone says they have sample tracking. So what that means is I think what we're talking about, and I've categorized these into 3 segments. There's courier tracking, there's standard tracking, and then there's hyper tracking. And the hyper tracking is something new we're seeing over the last couple of years, especially in the advanced therapy, cell and gene trial space. But when we talk about courier tracking, you're getting information, 24 hours later, the shipment's been picked up. You're not really monitoring it. It's that courier tracking where through your courier, which every central lab has, and they get alerts, a list of alerts of a weather delay, et cetera, and you're given a list of some basic information and an airway bill number. So your reaction tracking, okay, we have X amount of packages stuck in Memphis due to some weather delays. But we don't know what's in that package. We know it came from a site, but we don't know what subject, what sample, what visit. So with standard tracking that LabConnect's been providing over the last 10 years is with that digital pen technology and other means, we're able to look at and see that that sample is in transit by that subject, the actual form that's in transit, it's linked to the airway bill number. So that gives you that level of detail. And we're also forecasting. So it's not reaction tracking. We're actually forecasting. We know I should have received this form and I didn't get the form by the missed visit. Or I'm also tracking it once I know that they've shipped it and it's in transit. It's in the dashboard as in transit. So we can monitor and see where that sample is. If there's a delay, can we intervene? And if there high-value samples, you've also used your logistical SMEs, right? That logistical plan we talked about, integrating the strategies of logistics. And if it's truly a high-value sample, you want to make sure that you can, do dry ice replenishment by selecting the right courier that we can navigate, that you have a relationship with that courier that can mitigate any downstream delays for that sample to ensure that we can get that sample where it needs to be. So the hyper tracking, this goes back to bringing in the scheduling. So we're seeing the complexities of these studies remaining complex, but also when we talk about the product tracking, we need to know when that subject's coming in. So we're working with the client, knowing when they're coming in. They're coming in at 1 o'clock today. We're waiting for the form, right? We know that they should have their visit. We have the courier. Everything's all in place. Everything's ready to go, scheduled. So if we don't get that form and information within an hour or 2 hours, however we've set it up with the client, we're going to be querying and monitoring. And then we're really just live monitoring that shipment from pickup and all the way downstream. So this is really that hyper tracking model. It is truly real time. Over the last 10 years, we thought standard was real time, but this is truly real time, as you can get. But again, all of this is done in a virtual setting, right, without us ever receiving a sample. So some logistical strategies, I've already touched on these a little bit, but when you do put together a protocol and you look at the samples and where they're going, what analysis is being done, what is their stability, what locations, the site locations, the lab locations, you have to look at in time and cost, and what shippers are we going to use. Shipping is a huge part of a clinical trial budget. How can we minimize that shipping? If you don't have to ship and you can ship monthly, there's a lot of times we'll put together a protocol back, before we had this capability and say, I want to, clients are shipping samples weekly just so they can get accountability of what samples have been collected. Well, imagine if you could just keep it at a site, if they have the storage capabilities and put together that plan, you can reduce shipping costs, have them remain at the site. They don't have to be shipped multiple times. They can go directly to the laboratories. So really having that capability of that virtual knowledge and real-time data cleaning and pulling in the logistical pieces, you can reduce those costs of shipping and also reduce the chances of any issues. Every time you put a sample in transit, there's a potential risk there, right? So Now I want to go through patient-centric services. We talked a little bit earlier about home healthcare, home visit support. So if you think about these trials and the increased need for home healthcare, how are we integrating that with our central lab services and the kits and being able to track and monitor and follow the quality and regulatory, integrating the shipping, the courier. So everything that I've talked about today with the logistics and the SMEs and the virtual tools, another component to that is integrating home healthcare. So being able to, having those patients be able to have their visit at home. I think we're seeing it obviously more and more nowadays with our situation, but this is going to be something that we're seeing, and we have seen an increased need already over the last 2 years. So I think it's going to be something that's going to become more mainstream, and it's also going to allow the patients to be able to stay at home and not have, because of the complexities and how many visits and how many blood draws, that they can do those visits from home. So integrating the kits and virtual accessioning and the logistics and that SME experience, you know, the home healthcare SME experience, all those SMEs that I talked about, wrapping this up, really providing that to those services to those patients and also the sites, right, making it easier for sites. So home healthcare is something that we're seeing. We utilize the virtual accessioning. We can integrate that rather easily with our everything you've seen today with the digital pen and the kit structures and the logistics. So really having a good relationship with the home healthcare agency and also having the ability to work with other home healthcare agencies that is contracted with the client and being able to integrate that rather smoothly with your current system. And so the virtual capabilities and being able to virtually provide this service and integrate is key. Having the tools to virtually do this, perform these services is key and allows easy integration. All right, so just an overall summary to just recap what we talked about. So everything we've talked about is really getting closer to the patient. The virtual capabilities of obviously bringing home healthcare, integrating the home healthcare into clinical trials. They can have their visits conducted at home, minimizing their travel. It's already difficult for them if they're ill. Product tracking, really this is very patient-centric, taking their own cells and being able to track and provide that high visibility and quality to track that product to the CMO and then back to the site for then distribution to the patient. Really enhances personalized care. And then the hyper-tracking model, which is something that, you know, is above and beyond, right, that extra monitoring. And then the virtual accessioning, all the tools for virtual accessioning, really having the ability to data clean in real time and have that information at your fingertips to reduce shipping costs, reduce downstream data cleaning. Everything is just cleaner when it's done in real time, right, and not waiting till later. So really all of these pull together for a great patient experience for those patients that are in clinical trials and also for the sites, right? If it's easy for the sites, then it's easy for them to provide good patient care. All right, that's the concludes. We can go to questions, Sonia.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephanie, for that insightful presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Now I would like to invite our audience members to continue sending in their questions or comments right now using the questions window for the Q&A portion of the chat, Q&A portion of the webinar. So I've already received some questions already, so I will start with those. So Stephanie, if you're ready, I'm going to begin. And
Sure.
The first question is, what is the site compliance with the digital pens?
Yeah, that's a great question. It comes up a lot, and that, you know, I did mention a few times that the compliance has been high. I didn't really give any metrics or numbers. So site compliance with the pen has been very successful. We have about 85% compliance rate just naturally without querying. Obviously, sometimes you'll have a site, there's a new personnel and they didn't know to use the pen, but what's nice, it's a pen, it writes with ink, and you can use any other pen on that paper as well, right? So the compliance is high, and obviously utilizing the forecast tools that we use, the compliance eventually gets up to 100% within a 24, 48-hour period because we are reconciling. So naturally it's 85%, and then that goes up to 100% with our follow-through with the forecasting. Great question.
Okay.
And just to also, just to add a little bit more to that, just the success factors in that we've been in 42 countries with our pens, so it's been well saturated, I think, in our site. So we'll get requests for proposals and site lists, and a lot of the sites already have the pens, so it's been widely used and very successful. We currently have over 900 pens deployed, and we've deployed over 2,200 in the last, I think, 5 to 7 years.
Wow. Okay, fantastic. Here's the next question from our audience. Is the pen overwriting errors on the form, or are these corrections?
They write on the form with a pen, and if they did make an error and they wrote through it, you can write anywhere on that form. It's going to capture any pen stroke on that paper. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the field. So if they made an error, they just do their normal process of crossing out and initialing and dating, and then we can correct that information once we get that form on our side. So their process is completely the same. They should continue to use GDP. If they make an error, it's okay. You can write anywhere on the form. They can make comments in the form. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Here's another one here. Do the ref labs confirm receipt of samples?
Yes, that's a great question. Preferably, so the digital pen comes in handy when we start talking about academic labs for receipt. So academic labs or labs that don't have a sophisticated LIMS system, it would be easier because every time we receive a form for receipt, we have to review it, right? So there's a process there. We have a network of labs that we utilize, and we try to get those labs that have that capability to confirm receipt automatically. So everything's linked, so they wouldn't have to use, they can utilize their own process. So we really evaluate each lab in a study and confirm that tracking plan and receipt and how we're going to get that data. So if they send, I would prefer they send it to us automated through a system that's been validated, et cetera, like a data transfer, and they can follow their own processes. For those labs that don't have that capability, the pen is ideal because that form is an interface to our database to confirm receipt.
The next question we have is, what is your timeline to create and provide sample visit kits to sites?
It really depends on the study and complexity. Obviously, I talked about having having that flexibility and changes and being able to react quickly. But also that goes for studies that need to be set up quickly, right? So it really depends on the complexities. There's what's humanly possible. So I think on average, and I think everybody's it's on average it's about 8 weeks, right? So for a very complex study, it could be upwards of 10 or 12. And for a low complexity, it could be 3 or 4 weeks, just depending on what we're doing. So there's a wide range there. However, when we talk about adapting to being able to do things quickly, if something that we say is going to take about 8 weeks, and a client needs it in 6, we do offer expedited service. Obviously, there's a cost to that. But then there's also a component of humanly possible, right? So we'll outline what is humanly possible, what's our standard workflow, and then if there would be any expedited fee to do anything in between.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question here, Stephanie. Do you query at the kit level or sample level to know what to expect? Do you need to be provided with enrollment information to know when patients discontinue?
Very, very great question. So we query at all levels, sample, visit, subject. So, and those are flagged in our system as such. So a query that is, let's say, whether a sample was collected would only apply to that sample. And we do track status, subject status. So it is helpful. We do need to know whatever mechanism of getting that information. So let's say a subject were to screen fail or they were to withdraw, we have that status available that we can update and work with clients to get that information. So we would have to get that information from the client somehow, by means in which that's on a client level, on a client by client basis.
Okay. Next question I have for you is, what if a site forgets to use the pen, or what happens when they make an error?
Yes, so if a site forgets to use the pen, that's fine. We're using our forecasting, so obviously that goes back to that 85%. We'll get it. We're going to be querying for that 15, and so we'll have them just scan and fax the form, scan or fax. If fax does exist, believe it or not, scan the form to us. Those are alternate methods on the form. So they'll send those forms to us, and we can get that into the system within 24 hours. And then if they make an error, again, going back to GDP, all they have to do is cross out the information, initial and date, and write the correct information.
All right. Uh, we have time for a couple more questions. So the next question I have for you is, does tracking work globally? How does the tracking in home healthcare work?
Right, great question. Yes, tracking works globally. Like I said, we've had pens in 42 different countries, and whether it's pens or not, we work with the courier. Again, we work together with that sample tracking plan. We have sites all around the world, so it does work globally just fine. Yep. So the home healthcare component, yes, it's global. So what we do is we do have a partnership with a home healthcare agency, our preferred provider that we use, and so we integrate well with a seamless process to provide those services to our clients. And really, just at a very high level, it's just treating the home healthcare agency as a site for distribution. And then also we have the capability for clients to contract with their own home healthcare providers. So we just work with them. Obviously, then we ship, obviously, depending on the home healthcare agency's preference and how they execute and logistically distribute kits. We work with them to provide that service.
Okay, and I think that's it for questions right now. Okay, well, thank you very much to everyone who participated with those questions. We have reached the end of the question and answer portion of the webinar. If we couldn't attend to your questions, the team at LabConnect will try to follow up with you after this presentation. If you have any further questions, please address them to the email address that's on your screen, and that's Jamie McCarthy, Marketing Manager at jmccarthy@labconnect.com. Stephanie, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all very much.
Thank you for everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email with XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Get even more out of today's presentation by downloading the supporting materials available under the Handouts tab. Now, I'm about to send you a link in your chat box. You'll be able to view the recording of this event at that link and also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking our speaker again, that's Stephanie, for her presentation. We hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at XTalks, we thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Hunt. Until next time, take care and bye for now.